And obviously, last but not least, we have Nier.
Wow.
I don't think
Speaking
we need to
of,
ask you what you have.
yeah. So I watched Trigun
Yes.
Stampede. Um,
Trigun Stampede.
this is the Studio Orange production
Yes,
that we
sir.
have. Fully CG. Um, this is a remake, reboot of the famous Trigun series. Um, Staff. I guess I'll go over the staff first. Um, Director Kenji Muto. This is
Okay.
effectively his directorial debut. Um, he directed like a children's short back in like 2009 or something.
I'm
So
actually
I don't
really
really count it.
surprised. Although I think what they're doing is probably because he did work in he did
I
work
mean,
in
he's done
Hoseki no Kuni.
storyboarding. Yeah, he's done
He helped with
storyboarding and episode directing for Hoseki no Kuni, Beastars.
yeah, so they're probably trying to grow him a
Um,
little bit.
he
Like
worked on
what a project to
Punchline
grow.
and Senkyu no Terror. But yeah, this is effectively his directorial debut.
Yeah.
Scripted series composition is done by Tetsuro Inamoto, Shin Okushima, Yoshihisa Ueda. All three of these people seem to be relative newcomers
Mhm.
to the industry, with Tetsuro Inamoto working on Lupin the Third from 2015 and Hajime no Ippo um, in 2013. And then Okushima Shin previously worked on Kekotsu Shoten Honda-san, which, if you remember, is the comedy short
Yes.
of the skeleton dude in the bookstore,
Yes, yes.
which
Oh,
was
no, I definitely remember that. Yes.
pretty famous when it came out.
By
Um,
the way, do you remember if like either Beastars or Hoseki no Kuni was composed of like outside veterans, or were they also kind of like newbie people within Orange Studio and so on?
I don't really remember. I feel like for Hoseki no Kuni, I think was some relative newcomers. I don't
Hmm.
really remember for Beastars though.
Okay.
But yeah, it's definitely an interesting cast. Music by Tatsuya Kato. He's worked on a lot of stuff. He's done Dr. Stone. He's done Free and all of its movies. Prisma Ilia and all of its movies. And what was it? Love Live Sunshine as well.
Yeah,
Amongst
a lot of the
many
connections.
other projects. And then art director by Yuji Kaneko, which I think probably the most um, probably one of the most seasoned people on here. He's worked on Osama Ranking. He worked on one of the Star Wars Visions shorts. Um, he did what was it? Hisone Tomaso-tan, Bubuki
Mhm.
Buranki, Kill la Kill. You know, he's done a lot of stuff. A lot of big stuff as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then obviously, you know, um, original creator, uh, Yasuhiro Naito. I believe he's overseeing this as well. Um, Obviously, creator of Trigun, Kekai Sensen, and Gungrave. Um, but yeah, I think the first thing I'm going to tackle with this series is probably the reception. I think is probably worth getting um, out of the way first and foremost.
Yeah. Can I
Um,
also just one last note on the production? So from what I saw in Hoseki no Kuni, I just did a very quick skim. Um, it seems to be it seemed to be a mix of like newcomers that were kind of in Orange Studios, but then also composed of like directors, director, and so on, and some like art directors and stuff like that. Were veterans that a lot of them came from Sunrise, but it was specific to sort of the Love Live era of Sunrise.
right,
So it's like they pulled, I think, on those connections. And
right,
so that sort of 3D CG connection, during that era might have been, again, with Sunrise as well, who does like Mecha and so on, might have been the connection to Orange.
right.
Sorry, please go on.
Um, yeah, so Trigun Stampede, if you've been living under a rock and you haven't seen sort of I'm mostly going to be focusing on obviously the Western fan base here, largely because I can't read Japanese. And that's largely the most vocal reception. And honestly, the Trigun fan base has really been carried by the Western community, even since the 90s version.
Mhm.
But yeah, ever since the announcement of Trigun Stampede, backed by Studio Orange, the sort of um, Trigun fan base, and I put that in air quotes because I'm going to be honest, a lot of Trigun fans straight up haven't watched Trigun. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, a lot of people sort of reacted pretty negatively because Trigun is a pretty famous series. It came out, in the era of Cowboy Bebop and
Yeah,
all
it
those
is
other
very famous.
Toonami era anime.
I would
So
also
people
say it was formative, or inspirational for a lot of people as well,
for
who are in
sure,
the industry. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but Trigun, as a series, has a very interesting history with its adaptations in relation to the source material. Um, but yeah, so the fact that this was a CG anime, people were already upset about. And then when they revealed Vash's redesign, people chimped out. People were really upset.
That's me.
Um, yeah, and um, and then the anime came out, and people effectively just shit on it for literally no reason. A lot
Mhm.
of so if you look online about reviews or whatever about Trigun Stampede, if you see a negative review that is sort of like initially starts off with, as a fan of the original, or if you've watched the
Yeah.
original, um, they're immediately going to vomit out a bunch of diarrhea about how this series just doesn't get the original, or it it's just totally different, and not it doesn't adhere to the source material at all.
Also,
Um,
ick 3D CG.
yeah. Also, it's CG, and I don't like that, and it's yucky. Um, those reviews are effectively like you really don't even need to read them, because most of those people watched one episode. They already didn't like the series from the initial promotional material. They had already made up their mind.
Mhm.
Um, and Trigun fans, again, I'm going to put this in air quotes, are very similar to really any fans of very classic anime. I'd
Mhm.
say, you know, it's sort of, I guess, similar to the reaction. Obviously, a bit more um, violent, I guess. It's a bit more of a um, harsh reaction to something I'd say comparable to when they announced the Evangelion movies, right? And how they would be sort of changing up the story. Um, Fans of classic anime, 90s anime, really don't like change. Um, they really don't
I
like,
hate his hair, Near.
yeah, well, I mean, his hair is like literally the least of these people's issues. Um,
I hate his gun too, Near.
yeah, people don't like his hair, people don't like his glasses, people don't like his coat, people don't like his arm, people don't like his gun. And so you have all this dumb shit, all this superficial shit, and people already make up their minds where they don't like the character, like they just don't like it. It's not Vash, right? Um, and they view this series with a lens of like immediate negativity. Um, and the issue is, uh, you kind of have to ask yourself, could Studio Orange, or really any studio, do Trigun today, um, without it either being A, boring as fuck because they don't change anything, and then it's lambasted because it's like, why would you watch this new series when you could literally just go back and watch the 98 series,
Or just
right?
like remaster, HD
Yeah.
remaster or something. Yeah.
Or B, get shit on all over because they changed a single aspect of the story, like literally
Mhm.
anything. And
It's like that. It's like the classic Sayonara Zutsubo Sensei thing, where they're going into an alleyway and like it's about like there's a director who's like, "Oh, it's just homage. It's just an homage. Don't
yeah,
hit me. Don't
yeah,
hit me."
yeah. And the answer is no. Like you literally cannot make Trigun today without the fans like shitting and pissing themselves, right? Because if you don't change anything, there's no point in watching it. But if you do change anything, there's no point in watching it, right? Because
Yes.
the
Yes. Yes.
original the original 1998 Trigun is the holy gospel. Like if you touch it at all, it's like blasphemy, you know. Um,
Mhm.
and I myself am a fan of Trigun. I like Trigun. It's got a really cool aesthetic. It's got a really cool story. It's got really fun characters. Um, but I'm gonna be honest. The original 1998 anime is paced horribly.
Mhm.
It deviates from the manga a lot, right? Because when that series came out, um, Trigun, like halfway through the manga production, effectively got canceled, right? Like, it basically got canned. And the studio was like, well, we have to fill out these episodes, right? Like we're we're hired for a certain number of episodes, so we sort of have to just go in a direction. And obviously they worked with the mangaka to make a story. And then afterwards the manga continued, right? And the manga went in a
Right.
different direction, like a totally different direction. Um, and then movies came out later that followed the manga more closely, and people shit on those movies. Trigun fans shit on the movies which followed the manga.
Near his
Um,
gun sucks though.
I mean, his gun isn't relevant in this. Like, it's not relevant. Um, but it's like you literally can't make Trigun after the 1998 anime because everybody that watched that show in 1998 have this like idolization of it, um, to where like, you know, that is Trigun, right? And
I
I
think
think
the
it's
important part is that also like there are obviously like you always want to keep the good stuff if possible and it works, right? But
yeah,
I think the important point that you're implying, right? The most important point that you're implying is that Trigun fans are getting held up over parts of it that may look like it's symbolically so important, but it's not actually that important to Trigun in the in the
yeah,
plot and
it's
the
like
actual
it's
nature
not.
of the
It's
story.
not.
Right.
Like Toast can piss and moan about the fact that Vash's gun isn't a 45 caliber anymore. But it's like,
22, my dude.
does that matter? Does that matter? No, it
It
doesn't
matters to
matter.
me. It looks less
Um,
cool, Near.
it doesn't matter. He doesn't even shoot his gun in this series. Like he hates shooting his gun. Um,
Honestly, I would feel better if he had a laser gun or a stun gun. Because what made Trigun so good was that old 90s aesthetic of gritty cowboy stuff.
Yeah,
And,
so that's another thing I want to get into is
alright,
that every time people talk about Trigun, right, the original Trigun, they say, "Oh, it's this cool 90s anime and it's like a western, right?" And nobody ever talks about the plants, nobody ever talks about the sci-fi shit, nobody ever talks about the space colony shit because honestly, in the original Trigun, that stuff sucked ass. It was terribly done. There were really bad twists that were done like 75% of the way through the series. They added really nothing. Um, and it was just not good, right? And there's
Near,
a
do you like
reason.
Wild Arms?
Yeah, I do.
Good.
Wild Arms is good. Um,
Do
but
you
yeah, like
think Wild Arms would be popular nowadays? Because Wild Arms has that whole 90s gunslinger aesthetic that I
I,
don't think holds well nowadays.
I mean, it's tricky, right? Because again, the aesthetic of 90s anime, and the way that like 90s anime was done, with the style, with the big hair, the way eyes were done, the sharper faces. I think it lends itself very well to that sort of cowboy westerny, slightly gritty yet slightly
Escapism.
comedic.
Escapism.
Yeah, like just that aesthetic, right?
Mhm.
And I think the way a lot of anime is done today, it's sort of harder to land that aesthetic, right? Obviously,
Sure. Yeah.
Western style anime has come out um, in the past few years, right? Whether it be some weird bent on you know a Japanese style Western or a raw Western, but they really just don't hit the same, right? Um,
People want a little bit more damp, muted,
yeah,
organic
whether it's
look.
due to the colors or just the fact that uh,
Superman has to think about killing people now.
things are animated digitally now instead of on cells. There's a lot that goes into that old school Western aesthetic, right? And I
I
think it's very hard to recapture that. Um,
I
It's like
think
how
the
Appare
only
Ranman also tried, right?
yeah, yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
the only series that somehow captures the 90s gritty aesthetic and made it modern without losing its identity is actually Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's
Yeah,
like it
yeah.
has this.
I think it really holds. I think another series that came pretty close to that was No Guns Life, actually.
Mhm.
Had a really
Yes.
nice, like,
Yes,
sort of
yes.
gritty 90s-esque aesthetic. But yeah, it's very hard to capture these days. And I think if something like um Wild Arms came out today, um
Do you think it would go more towards this Trigun route? Because I think it would,
I think it
in
would.
order to make it more
I think
modern.
it would be
Yeah.
more I think it would be a bit more um it would be a bit more serious in tone, I think. It wouldn't be as gritty. It would be a bit more um maybe somber, I guess. So
This is
I should probably get
this
into
is
Trigun.
hold on.
Um
This is the same argument we had of like a while back about it's no longer steampunk aesthetic, like Western steampunk aesthetic for Trigun. It's more like It's more like what is it? How we called it high science for Trigun or whatever it was called. What was it?
yeah, so Stampede is much more sci-fi.
Yeah.
Um
Okay.
it's a bit
Mhm.
less Western.
It's
Obviously
almost
the
leaning into
Western
like cyberpunk-ish kind of.
Yeah, the Western tone is there, especially for the first three episodes. But it drops that a bit earlier than the original Trigun, because like I said, the original Trigun, like, it introduces the sci-fi stuff very late in the game.
Mhm.
I think in the original 98 series, which is like a 26 episode run, if I remember right,
Mhm.
um, the initial like sci-fi stuff gets like dropped. It's like a fucking bombshell when they drop that shit, and it's like episode 17 or something, right? So it's very late in the game, and it holds on to the cowboy aesthetic for a long time, which is again why people, when they talk about the original Trigun, they talk about the Western part of it, because like the latter half of the 98 series kind of blows, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But yeah, onto Stampede. I think I should talk about. So Stampede is a
If
reboot.
you just if you can focus on just I think obviously if people really want to get into the world of Trigun, they can obviously experience it. If I think the focus should probably on the differences between this Stampede and the original, right? I think
Yeah, I mean,
that's yeah.
I'm not gonna go into every single
Mhm.
like character difference and shit like that, because there's a lot of character, like pretty much every character from the original, like
Mhm.
the villains. I forget what were they called in
The
the
gung ho
original,
guns,
the gung ho gang,
the
right?
Mhm.
gung ho guns. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty much all of those guys so far have made an appearance, but they're very different, right?
Mhm.
They're very reimagined. Along with obviously Knives himself. But yeah, Trigun Stampede is uh a reboot. It's very different. Um, so Trigun Stampede opens, like, cold opens on the spaceship that Vash and Knives are from. And so in the world of Trigun, the planet, which in this they call No Man's Land, it's basically a desert planet, and humanity was essentially space, like going through space looking for a planet to recolonize because Earth is fucked, right? And through this journey, the spaceships all explode, right? They crash on No Man's Land, and it turns out that it's Knives that did it. And Trigun Stampede like basically starts with this. Like it sets this up instantly, where it's like, you know, Vash and Knives are from space, right? And it then, sort of does a flash forward to our new younger version of Meryl Streep and our new character that's exclusive to Stampede, Roberto De Niro, and they're
Classic.
both reporters in this, and they're on the lookout for a new scoop, and they just so happen to run across Vash, and then they get caught up in his journey, right? And the first 3 episodes is effectively just setting up Vash, Meryl, Robert, and then later on Knives as he comes into conflict. And the first 3 episodes all take place in a single town. And I've seen some people sort of lambast the first 3 episodes for being way too too action packed. Because it's basically
Too action
3.
packed?
Yeah,
Really?
I've seen some people say like there's too much happening in the first 3 episodes, because the first 3 episodes is in the first episode, Vash gets essentially attacked by July police, right? They're after him for the bounty on his head. They're looking to arrest him, and then he has to have a duel with the police to sort of get his get a moment of freedom, basically. And he pushes them out of town, and then the immediate episode after that, these convicts break out, and they immediately go after Vash, and they converge on the same town to go after his bounty, and then some action ensues, and then the town itself goes after Vash because they want the bounty on his head to fix their water plant thing. And then in the third episode, Millions Knives himself shows up. He fucking obliterates the town. And then, Vash sort of has to move on. And I've seen some people say like there's too much happening. It's like it's too fast of a series of events on this single town. But I think the first 3 episodes are really made to set up and demonstrate that really wherever Vash goes, there's going to be conflict, right? There's going
Yeah,
to
it's
be
like a prelude
See,
story. It's
see,
like
Near,
one
you
of his
get
like
it
small tales.
because
yeah,
it's the rule of 3 in anime. You have at least 3 episodes to hook them in, and you have to show him why he's called the humanoid typhoon.
yeah.
So, yeah, I get it.
They initially set him up as the humanoid typhoon, and the characters around him are like, what a stupid nickname, right? That's really dumb. And then after these 3 episodes, pretty much everyone's like, yeah, I understand why you're called the humanoid typhoon,
Yeah, see?
and it's
Right,
either
right.
people feeling bad for Vash, in the case of Meryl, or people basically be like, get out of here, like leave and never come back.
Yeah,
Because
I think
everywhere
the
you
first 3
go, you bring
episodes,
suffering.
I think those 2 were good just because like it sets that up while staying in the same place. I think that was a smart idea, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I think staying in
Because
the same place is smart because you have the persistent characters that are going through a small mini arc of sort of warming up to Vash, and then, sort of being like, I don't want to be around him anymore. And you let that sort of grow for a bit, while also, um, demonstrating that Vash can't be in the same place for very long, because otherwise it just all gets ruined. But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that, after the first 3 episodes, it's effectively just it sort of becomes pseudo-episodic, with the general overarching goal of reaching July, which is the
Right.
capital, sort of, and where Millions Knives is basically his base of operations. And this
Wait, is this 12 episodes with the second season planned? What's happening here?
this is 12 episodes. I don't know if there's a second season planned. There's
There's
currently
got to be a
9.
second season planned,
There's
right?
currently 9 episodes out right now, and it's looking primed to have the climax in the 12th episode.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Why this doesn't have enough money to go season 2?
I don't know.
And people will riot in the streets. That's what'll happen.
I think there could be a season 2. I think it could wrap up if there could be a season 2 either way. I think it's pretty well paced the way that they've gone so far. But yeah,
it's called Trigun Stampede, right? You gotta go
Yeah.
Trigun Maximum Stampede.
True.
How are the audio visuals here?
Yeah, so Studio Orange, I mean, the audio visuals are pretty stellar, I think.
What do you mean it's 3D CG? It can't be good.
Yeah, I'd say they're really good across the board. I think the only real complaint I've had is probably the scene in episode 1, in the duel, right, where they're on like
Right.
the cliffside. I think the environment in that scene is pretty bad. However, most of the environments throughout this show have largely been a pretty nice mix of like hand painted and like 3D
Oh, okay.
environments, and they look really nice. Some people, I guess, probably maybe don't like the way that the 3D models sort of look like they're maybe not necessarily blending into the hand painted backgrounds 100% perfectly all the time. Personally, I think it looks really good. There are some minor moments where it's like, but it's just sort of the growing pains of the technology, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall,
Also, the thing is, it's like with again. I mean, it's one thing to be like, we have to consider the limitations of 3D and stuff like that. But also, I just want to say for all the people out there who are like, ugh, 3D can't ever be, it's like automatically down because 3D. Like, if you're going to say that, you also have to say out loud in public that Beastars and Hoseki no Kuni are bad series because they are 3D. Like, you can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it.
yeah,
Okay. So,
it's dumb.
Also, hey man, there were like 2 episodes that weren't, so
yeah, that's true.
or well, 2 half episodes that weren't 3D.
Yeah. So there were some. So in Wolfwood's episodes, there's some 2D sections for his backstory, and like Wolfwood's backstory in the orphanage, and there's some really nice like storybook-esque 2D animation. It looks really nice. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much entirely CG. There's been like a handful of like 2D characters because I guess Studio Orange probably didn't want to make 3D models for characters that were going to show up for like 30 seconds.
Is it the best CG you've ever seen in anime near?
Um,
Is it better than Hoseki no Kuni?
so personally, I say no. I think Hoseki no Kuni
Okay.
is probably still the top.
It has that-
Hoseki no Kuni for me was just like the mix of the lighting.
Hoseki no Kuni was also like it was trying to achieve a new style focused on the 3D, whereas Trigun Stampede is still kind of like we're trying to do what 2D did, but in 3D.
Well, I think
They're kind of different ideas.
Trigun
right?
has I think like if they went back and fingers crossed, we get another season of Hoseki no Kuni, I think it would obviously look better than the first. Like I think
Yeah.
technically, I think their technical
Yeah, I mean,
skill is
on a
increasing
technical,
every time.
yeah, definitely on a technical aspect.
It's just
This
that this
is,
doesn't lend itself as well
yeah,
as something like
Yeah.
Hoseki no Kuni
I'd
can.
say the only thing really holding Trigun back in terms of being one of the best looking like CG um representations like in the industry is the setting, pretty much. Like pretty much all of it is open deserts.
Okay.
You don't
That's
have
fair.
fields of flowing grass like you do in Hoseki no Kuni. You don't have the sun shining through the big like temple windows that are reflecting off of the gem's hair.
Right,
You
right,
you
right.
don't really have moments like that in Trigun. Trigun is still very beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but it's the very little the minor things that I think push Hoseki uh just a little bit above. Granted, I'm a bit biased. I like Hoseki no Kuni a lot. Um, but yeah, like overall, uh, in terms of like just raw technical CG animation, um, I mean it's a feast for the eyes, right? Like there's a scene, I think it was episode 4 or 5, where the cast gets stuck in a giant sandworm, right? And in order to get out, um, Wolfwood uses his big cross gun as a laser beam, and he cuts the big worm like clean in half. Um,
No
and it is
longer a
it's
missile launcher now; it's a
yeah,
laser.
yeah, it's a big laser beam. Um, but it's a really cool scene. Like it's really well done. They do this really cool like slow-mo pan around the gun, and it looks like something out of like a AAA video game. Like the detail on Wolfwood's gun is like absurd. It's really really cool. Um, but yeah, audiovisually, stellar. Like completely just knocks it out of the park. Um, in terms of story, um, so the story again is very different. Um, the way characters act, the backstories are different. Vash's backstory is very different. Um, Vash's attitude is also quite different. Um, in the original, right, Vash sort of flip flops a lot in the original between a very comedic character, right? Like he's a dork, like he's kind of a loser, to like this like super extreme, hyper badass, right? And in Stampede, he's a bit more somber. He's a bit more
He's a sad himbo now, dude.
yeah, he's a bit of a sad boy in this. Um he's still a bit of a goof.
I can
He's
fix him. Jesus.
um but yeah, he you can sort of tell that, I don't know. I really like this Vash personally, so I'm just gonna put that out there. But like, I might splurge a bit here. But so the way they do Vash, I think here is really well done. Because the way he like the times he smiles, you could it's sort of one of those um like a pained smile. Like you can sort of see like the sadness in his eyes. Um, but like he's still like forever an optimist. Um, but he doesn't do, you know, like the weird crab walking bits anymore. Like there's not like weird slapstick stuff. He's still a dork, but he's a bit more of like he's a sad, more tortured character, and I think that comes through a bit more while being a bit less like because in the '98 series, right, you would sort of go between Vash being sort of this like like Nichijou-esque character to like a brooding, you know, oh everything is bad and nothing is good type of character, right? And it was a bit jarring sometimes. And granted, that's what that's what people like about Vash, where he can he can be both of those and be cool at the same time. But I think
Right.
this one is a bit more focused, a bit more cohesive as a character, and it lends itself better to the series' tone overall.
I think the original Trigun was it fit the manga, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds obvious because it's a manga,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
like it fit the manga and the cultural mood of how a manga like this, like an escapist manga, should
Yeah,
be
I mean
done at the
manga like
time.
that at the time,
Just
were
do
just
kind of
like that, right?
whatever.
Like you
Yeah,
had
yeah,
you had the
exactly.
cool badass like gunslinger scenes,
Yeah.
and then a
And you
couple
didn't really
panels.
squeeze, you didn't really think about it too hard. You just
Yeah, a
kind of
couple
did it for the
panels later,
story.
you'd have a gag, right? You'd have a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
weird, like
exactly.
cartoony panel, right? Like something like Helsing was similar, right?
It was
Um,
MCU before MCU, essentially, like, in a
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
But again, I do think this Vash is a bit more somber, and I think
Mhm.
this series overall is a bit more somber. Something I um took note of as I was watching this is I feel like, so I don't know if this is just me, maybe I'm insane, but I got some real like Casherin Sins vibe from when
That's
I was watching this.
that's neat.
Yeah.
That's a good take.
Yeah, it's very so the way because like I said, it's semi-episodic, right? And the way the episodes are sort of structured is they'll sort of come across uh, a character or a town or something, and as the episode progresses, you'll learn more about the characters. You sort of empathize with them, and then you know either conflict will arise and something sad happens, or something not so sad happens, but either way you have to move on, right? Like the journey has to continue, you still have to get to your
Right,
destination.
exactly.
And it's very, again, I keep using this word, it's very somber, but like that is the tone overall, and I think it's done very well. But yeah, a lot of the characters have very different tones, or they're completely retooled. Like I forget what he was called in the original series, but the big, like the huge, like muscular guy with like the big, like Gatling rocket launcher thing. He was just some merc in the original that Knives hires to like go and fight Vash. But in this series, he is actually a kid that Vash used to know. Like he had helped him out one time, and Vash had made a promise to him that, you know, if you ever need help, I'll be there to save you, right? Um, and
Oh,
they come
Zazie the
across.
Beast. Zazie the Beast, right?
No, Zazie
Oh,
is the insect dude in
yeah.
this. It was
Thinking of someone else.
the big guy with like
Uh,
Gatling guns on his arm. Um, but yeah, in this he's a kid that Vash said that he, if he ever needed help, he'd save. Um, but when he did need help, Vash wasn't there, right? And he got experimented on and turned into this big monster. And when they found the town, um, they ended up having to fight him, right? And right when Vash is sort of trying to get through, and sort of get him to remember like who he was, um, Wolfwood ends up killing him, right? He ends up shooting him, and it's this big moment where Vash is like, why did you do that? You don't get to decide who lives and dies, right? Because Vash as a character, he has a very strict like no killing rule, um, and Wolfwood is like, well, he's a bad guy. I'm going to kill him, right? Um, but the reasoning Wolfwood gives in this is like it's a mercy, right? Like it's better to have him like just kill him as opposed to have him live as a monster, um, and it's sort of this clash of ideals, and I don't know. This series is just really, it is very Cash and Sins, where it's like, you have these characters that are like they live and die by their ideals, right?
Mhm.
And that is very much the focus of the show is Vash's no killing rule, and like how far can he really push that before something he cares about is lost, right? Like how far can he push this no killing rule until because Knives is out here trying to kill all of humanity, right?
It's like some
And
Dark Knight shit.
yeah, like the idea is, you know, will like the obviously the main premise that Stampede is really pushing is will Vash be able to kill his brother Knives in order to save not only humanity but the plants as well.
Will
And
Batman ever kill Joker?
yeah. Um and in this, I think his no killing rule is done. It's pretty different. So they don't really give an explicit purpose for Vash's no killing rule other than he just values life. Because in the previous one, like Vash was like he got pretty close to killing people quite a few times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But his no killing rule was sort of connected to his backstory, and if he ever killed someone, he'd essentially lose like his memories of REM, basically, right? Like he would basically lose part of himself. But in this series, he doesn't really have that. It's more of just like it's not really someone's place to decide who lives and dies in any given scenario. Um,
My question is also there's this like focus on that and kind of not smoothing up, but like focusing on that sort of um moral story, right? Moral has a moral story, and we've seen this kind of stuff obviously not just in um the old part of the old Trigun, but obviously as a focus in something like even just as recent as um what is it? I mentioned like the Dark Knight earlier, but there was also the Fantastic Beasts or whatever it was, like the Grindelwald Dumbledore thing, right? That's
mm,
essentially like the same thing. Um, I, there's a lot of these stories where it's how far can you go before you have to, stop being Mr. Nice Guy or whatever it is. Do you find this focus on this specific trope within Trigun Stampede um, emotionally compelling? Are you like,
I
okay,
so I find the fact that so it's not just a like will he be able to kill or will he kill? It's
right,
more of
right.
a clash and friction of that like no killing ideal against the other characters like Knives, right? Because Knives is essentially um like he's evil, right? He's fucking evil in this.
Mhm,
And he's his motivation is basically he's going to wipe out humanity and retake the planet so that way the plants can thrive, right? And plants in Trigun are basically like these alien extra dimensional beings, right? That sort of produce energy for humanity.
mhm,
Um, and um, like the friction against obviously Vash and Knives, but also in this the friction against Vash's ideals and Wolfwood's ideals, which is Wolfwood has lived a life of killing, um, and he's killed people in order to sort of protect what's closest to him, which is his orphanage, which he grew up in, and the people within it, right?
mhm,
And Wolfwood's ideals is basically you can't just you're not going to be able to save someone who is hell bent on shooting you in the head, right? um but Vash's ideal is no matter what you can always bring out the good in someone, right? And that sort of that friction and that them sort of coming to terms with their ideals with like each other is sort of where I think it is very compelling. It's not necessarily the ideal itself being tested that I think is compelling because
mhm,
again the no killing rule has been done for a very long time in a lot of
Yeah.
stories.
It's the
And
different ways that it gets tested and
yeah, it's
seeing
sort
that
of the way characters sort of react to it, and the way that they discuss it, and um, how it
So in a sense, that's almost like you're focusing on almost like a journey aspect, but instead of like how a lot of journey series are based upon the main character being an observer and seeing the other people do weird shit, right? But
yeah.
in this case, it's like the main character is doing the weird shit
Yeah,
and the other
the
people are
characters
observing them.
are sort of the participant, and
Right,
the
right.
the people and environment around them
Are
is
the
sort of
observers. Yeah,
they're sort of reacting to the main character's presence effectively.
right.
Um,
But the main character is still doing the journey.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a very it's very compelling, I'd say.
Mhm.
I will
If you're gonna
say,
if you're gonna compare no killing rules, you gotta compare Vash's no killing rule to someone else who had a no killing rule in the same time period, which was Kenshin.
yeah,
They had vastly different experiences, which led them to not kill.
yeah. But yeah, again, in this, so again, it's episode 9. They've already, so at this point, they have gone over Bash's backstory, which again is very different um, in this compared to both the manga and the original series. Because in the original series, Vash sort of travels with Knives for quite a while. And then, they sort of have a falling out. And I think in both cases, Vash ends up shooting Knives, and then through that he sort of develops his like no killing rule. But in this, he doesn't travel with Knives. He sort of finds his own family amongst the survivors of the space crash, and he gets raised. Um, and then um, he has a sort of conflict with Knives. His arm gets cut off, and then um, that's where he gets his gun from. Because Knives gives him the gun, and he tries to get him to basically shoot his adoptive mother. Because obviously Knives wants to kill all of humanity, and Vash refuses. Um, but he doesn't actually shoot anybody in that like backstory, so I'm not really sure where it doesn't concretely establish his no killing rule. He kind of just doesn't want to kill people, right? He sort of just believes in the goodness of people,
Yeah.
um, which I think is fine. But yeah, the backstory is very different. And then I will say my biggest complaint, and I think the one thing that a lot of people that are like, as a fan of the original, I think the one thing I will give them to is there was no reason to cut out Millie at all. Um, I think this new character, Robert De Niro, he doesn't really. I don't think he contributes very much to the story. He's supposed to be sort of this setup, um, a like pessimist character. He's kind of a downer. Usually he's like the first one to be like, we should run away, whenever things are dangerous, or you know um, he's supposed to be this sort of um, not like cowardly, but sort of like you know
He's a
the
Considering the
pragmatic type.
contrast.
yeah he's the more
He's
pessimistic,
hard boiled.
pragmatic side to Meryl, who is sort of at a crossroads between um, being more like Robert, or pursuing a more noble and um, optimistic route that Vash has taken, right? And Robert is supposed to be set up as, I guess, the counterweight to Vash, but he doesn't really have that much screen time, really. So he isn't really effective in that role, I think. And really, they could have just had Millie. Um, they could have just had the same dynamic as the original Meryl and Millie dynamic was, where Meryl was still sort of the more because in the original Meryl is a bit more of a pragmatist, right? and then Millie is a bit more of the, um, optimist. I think they could have had the same dynamic and effectively just done the same thing. There really isn't really any reason at all to cut Millie out. I'm not really sure why they went with that route, but it
I
is
I mean,
what
if
it is.
anything, they could have just flipped it and had Billy be the more pragmatic character, but
They could have,
Here,
but
they
here,
didn't
don't you know?
need to make her like a depressed drunk on top of it, really.
Here,
Like
don't you know? Millie or
Roberts.
Meryl. Meryl wasn't waifu enough in the original.
I disagree personally.
I mean,
I've always been a fan of Meryl, but
and then they made her too, and then so like, all right, we're gonna make her younger. We're gonna make her an intern. We gotta make her more, naive.
I mean, I do like Meryl in this series. I think her character.
You like your hat?
I do. It's cute. But yeah, I think Meryl's journey in this so far has been very interesting to watch. I just don't think Robert has contributed very much to that, which is unfortunate. But yeah, after that, I mean, obviously, Knives is very different. Again, Mash is different. Wolfwood is, I feel like he's pretty similar, to be honest. He's a bit more of a delinquent bad boy, I guess. But I think that's largely due to the fact that he's voiced by Yoshimasa Hosoya. But yeah, overall, I think most of the characters are very well done.
Mhm.
They stand out on their own compared to the original. They're different enough while being similar enough. I've also seen some people say that like this series sort of expects the viewer to have watched the original or know the original. I highly disagree.
No, I highly disagree because if you want something like that, that's called a Fate Extra Last Encore.
Yeah. I think this series, because I've seen some people say that, the fact that this series opens with the space crash is like, oh, they expect people to like know about, plants and the space thing and all this and that. It's like, no, they're just initially setting up that like, things are more than just like fucking a Western. You know what I mean? Like there's
I'm gonna
more
be
going on.
honest with you.
And
I
like
haven't
it's
watched the
foreshadowing.
original in like
Yeah, like
15 fucking years, and I
it's well done.
understood
Like
everything.
yeah, like
you
it's
don't
very well
need to,
done. It's
you don't need to
foreshadowed
remember
well. It's
shit.
explained later on very well. And it's given to you in enough sort of piecemeal bites to where it's not like an overwhelming exposition dump, like it was in the original, where they just fucking drop it on you like a bombshell. And it feels like it's part of the world from the beginning. You know what I mean? I think it's very well done.
And I think that was probably a huge, like, almost mandate for Studio Orange and anybody involved with this Trigun remake, right?
I mean,
Because
I
it's
wouldn't
like,
be surprised if it was a recommendation from the original creator himself, right?
yeah,
Where
yeah,
like,
or like regardless of like where the exact statement came out, like it had to have been like plastered on the wall somewhere. Like make sure that like a 4-year-old like coming out of the womb, like it was just like can watch Trigun, this Trigun,
yeah.
and be
Yeah,
amazed.
I think it's very well done. I think it's very well set up in the world. It's very natural feeling. None of it feels like, you know, you need to know these certain things or else you'll be totally lost because like it's explained to you well. Um, you know, the stuff that's new is new. The stuff that's not new is, told to you. Um, it's it's good. Like this, I think this show is really good. I think it does something very unique with the Trigun IP. It stands out on its own, um, and it's good on top of that. And really, I think a lot of the people pissing and moaning are really just upset about really superficial stuff. Whether that be it's CG or how big his gun is or whether his hair stands up or not. These are very I think these are very minor things to be caught up on.
Yeah,
This is Trigun. Like,
mhm.
I'm pretty sure there was an interview a couple months ago of the manga creator. I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote, but it was basically like, as long as you have Vash and you have millions knives,
Yeah, I was actually just about
it's
to mention.
Trigun, right? Like
Yeah,
that.
I was about to mention like almost exact because what I was thinking was like when you said it's Trigun, and what I was about to say was like Trigun itself seems like a very like if you think of Trigon as like a region, right? Like on a piece of paper or on a map, right? It seems like very amorphous and like what actually is the core of Trigon, if you think about it, like the commonality that would make people say, oh, this is Trigon, ultimately, like sensible people, right? Would ultimately be Vash's struggle, right?
Yeah.
And like with the immediate and with the help of support of the immediate cast around him, right? Or conflict against whatever. And so as long as that is kept in the story and is core of the story, then it's Trigun, right? And everything else is kind of everything outside of it is kind of in flux, right? Um so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when discussing these things, right? And it's not just like, oh, it's not Trigon anymore. Well, okay, what does that mean, right?
It means his hair isn't pointy anymore.
Damn near.
Bro, his hair is not good, bro. Orange Studio sucks.
Yeah.
Near, are you saying that Millie, Vash, and Knives were the real Trigun this entire time?
Yeah. Basically.
But where's Vash's third gun?
What,
Have they
the
revealed that
gun
yet?
in
I
his
don't think they
arm?
did. Yeah.
Or
Have they
no,
revealed that? I don't remember.
they haven't shown the gun
Yeah.
in his arm. So in I think the last 2 episodes, like 8 and 9, he like damages his arm. And then
Yeah,
in the
and
most
turns
recent
his
one,
hair or
he
whatever.
has it repaired, and whether he gets an upgrade to that or not
Because
remains to be
he
seen.
got an upgrade before, right? He went from a pistol to a submachine gun.
Yeah, but yeah, he hasn't shot a laser beam out of his arm just yet.
It's
Which
probably if
Has
it's
he?
a laser beam, I'm gonna
Has
be
is his
it's
hair changing?
no, not yet.
Okay.
But
because like if it is a laser beam, don't that's one I'm gonna be like, all right, that's enough laser beams from
it's
here.
probably gonna be a laser. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Like you got
Like,
Because
Wolfwood
that's
who
the
has a
cool
laser
thing.
beam, and it's like, come
I
on,
mean,
man,
to be
really?
honest, Wolfwood's laser beam was really cool.
Laser beam, there are places a missile launcher in that situation. I understand, but like a laser
But
beam just for a laser beam, because it's new tech.
yeah, I mean,
Uh,
they call it Lost Tech or whatever,
yeah.
but yeah, I kind of expect it to be a laser beam that he shoots out of his hand, which I think it shouldn't be. But we'll see. He's got the weird space arm, but personally, I'm a fan of the design. I like the big glasses. Um, I do like the old coat more. It's very
This one's just a hoodie, man.
yeah. I mean, I do like how in this they sort of gave his coat like story significance. Like it actually means something to him instead of
If
it
he
kind of just
did that, then why'd he tie it to the chocobo that one time? He
he
hates it,
didn't. That
near.
was just a red cloth.
All right.
But yeah. I don't know. I like a lot of the stuff that they've done with Vash as a character in this. I feel like he's really been fleshed out
Mhm.
to be a bit much more natural character. But yeah, I
So
do miss.
is your statement, by the way? So is your statement this is are you if you had to compare it? Unfortunately, you do have to
Of
in this
course,
world
yeah.
and age. If you have to compare it to the original Trigun, yeah,
Who'd win in a
would
fight?
you?
Yeah, near. Who'd win in a fight? Old Vash or New Vash?
Probably old Vash, right?
I mean,
Uh,
Old Vash is more of a like he's more of a I don't know if this is like offensive to say or not, but he's more like of a Spawn-esque character, where it's like when old Vash needs to like, beat the bad guy, like he's badass, right? Like he's
Right,
off the
right.
wall, he's fucking cool, he's slinging one-liners, he's got the gun in their mouth. He's like,
It's full Power Rangers
yeah,
mode,
like he's
essentially.
I could kill you right fucking now, but I won't.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so like old Vash, in terms of like being a badass, like old Vash wins, right? Um,
Old
but
Vash has what Looney Tunes logic sometimes.
yeah, definitely, right? Like, he's basically like, old Vash, if he needs to, he will drop a fucking piano on your head and he will make it look cool, right?
Mhm.
But new Vash, I think, is a more cohesive, focused, believable character.
Yeah, he needs to think
Um,
about that before he whacks you,
yeah.
essentially.
And it's it's fine to I think it's fine to prefer the original, because uh old school Trigun it is very, it's a killer aesthetic, and it's very, power fantasy. He's cool, cowboy gunslinger. He's got the cool glasses. He's got the spiky hair. He's a badass.
Mhm.
He's got the scars all over him. But
Did they reveal the scars yet? I don't remember.
they haven't shown any
Yeah,
scars on him,
yeah.
which I don't know if they
He's not tortured
will.
enough near.
Yeah, I do think they want to focus more on like, his emotional struggle as opposed to just being like, whoa, like, he's got pieces of his body missing. He's fucking cool. Um, Also, they probably don't.
He
They
can
probably don't really
regenerate. He
want
can
to model that,
regenerate it, but
honestly.
each scar tells a story.
Yeah. Um. But yeah, I mean, there's. I I don't know. I don't know if this is like a heathenist take, but I do think I like this Trigun a little bit more.
Okay.
I do think it's a bit more focused. Um, I do like the tone a lot. And you know, ideally, they don't fumble the bag with the climax.
Mhm.
But everything so far has been really good. Um,
And again, I think there's probably a season 2 coming up.
I think it's very possible. Again,
Yeah.
even if there's not, I have enough faith that they will wrap up the conclusion for it to be
Mhm.
satisfying enough.
Right, right.
But yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah.
Don't worry, near. You'll get your Dante versus Virgil fight because Knives actually uses knives this time. It won't be a
Yeah, he
cool.
uses millions of knives.
Yeah. We won't get a cool gunslinger duel at the end. It'll be Dante versus Virgil.
Listen,
Yeah.
dude, I don't even know what the hell Dash has got. That arm upgrade's got to be pretty good to deal with what we saw Knives can do. So
I mean, Vash has fucking space powers,
Because he
so
hasn't used it yet.
yeah,
yeah,
he hasn't been able to control it yet. But
he's gonna
you
have
know,
to. He's gonna have to get on that because
He'll be millions guns by the
that
end
attack,
of it.
that attack, on,
but
that
yeah,
attack on the
Knives
town
is
was
Knives is pretty
intense.
overpowered in this. But yeah, I like this. I like this series a lot.
Okay.
I think people that are poo pooing on this series should go kick rocks. Go watch the '90s series again, bro. Like,
Yeah.
As someone who prefers the '90s series, this one's all right. I've grown warmer towards it, but I still hate that gun.
Yeah, I
I,
think this is one of the few times that, I think also this is a part of people knee jerk reacting not only to the changes, but I think also just as a bias against this recent trend of remakes not necessarily being as good. But this is obviously you have to look at it on a case by case basis, and this time it ended up being pretty
it's
good.
definitely not
So
the worst remake we've
yeah,
gotten. There's
it's
definitely
definitely not like
worse ones.
Trigun, but then they accidentally made it into like an AV. You know what I mean?
It's not like a
or
certain.
Trigun, but they made it into a stage play with none of the characters from the original.
Hey, man, you fucking hey, listen up here. You fucking you're suffering. You're gonna suffer through Evangelion stage play or whatever. At least like it doesn't look like it's from a fucking like adult video. Okay, I have
There,
to fucking suffer through Saki adult video shit. Like the girls like wearing pink hair in a fucking live action movie. Okay, buddy.
It's a
You-
skill
yeah.
issue, I guess. I don't know.
I,
Should have
as
just
I,
had Evangelion money, bro.
yeah, you just should have just had even money, bro.
but like, has Vash done anything cool yet? Like this episode one with the cool rock, I guess. But like, I don't remember him doing anything super cool on par with old Vash just yet.
I
So like,
mean,
how is he going to fight knives if he's man? If he turns out he's just gonna talk him down instead of having a cool fight, I'm gonna be really upset.
so I think the main point there is that Vash has been basically glued to Wolfwood since episode 4, right? So a lot of the times they're kind of covering for each other in action scenes, which doesn't really give enough moments for Vash to really have cool moments. But I do think it's like it is more a tighter knit cast in this one,
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, it
but
goes
yeah,
back to the more like coherent plot. Yeah,
yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Again, I do think this is a bit more focused. I do think Vash will probably get some solo scenes in the coming last episodes, but yeah, the action scenes have definitely been sort of Vash and Wolfwood together, sort of tackling the problem. The scenes with what's his name, Livio, were cool though, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess with that we have properly wrapped up Trigun Stampede, and I
Not
definitely
yet,
couldn't think.
Spire. When it ends, we have to do a solo podcast.
we
How
bro,
does how does
we
Cyberpunk
literally
get
just
one, but
spent an hour on
Trigun
Trigun
doesn't? We
Stampede.
can talk more. We'll wait till it's done
Oh
though.
yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. But anyways, I definitely couldn't have had a better person to host it other than Nier. So again, thank you for helping to cover Trigun Stampede. It is the much discussed. I think that's the proper word to use.
Don't you mean
Much
controversial?
controversial, much discussed. I think I'll stick with the neutral term, I guess. Much discussed series or a remake rather, from Studio Orange, the infamous studio behind Beastars and Hoseki no Kuni, or Land of the Lustrous. They are 3D CG focused studio, and they have made a 3D CG anime remake of Trigun, again with all the modifications and bells and whistles that Nier talked about. If you do want a fresh, interesting, modern take on the core Trigun formula, please do check this out again, as Nier suggested.